Every July, roughly 600 amateur players hear their name, called across 20 rounds of the MLB Draft, and every single one of them walks away from that day believing, at least a little, that a big league career is now realistically within reach. The math says otherwise for almost all of them. Depending purely on which round a team calls his name in, one drafted player's odds of ever playing a single inning in the majors can be nearly 10 times higher than another player picked just a few hours later that same afternoon. That's not a talent gap most scouts would defend with a straight face if you ask them directly. A huge amount of it comes down to which round a team was willing to spend real money in, not some hard ceiling on who's actually good enough. Zoom out even further and the funnel gets almost absurd. Only about 0.5% of American high school baseball players will ever get drafted by an MLB organization at all, across all 20 rounds combined. Of those who do get drafted and sign, roughly 1 in 6 will ever play so much as a single inning in the majors, and nearly a third never even make it past the very first full season minor league level. Getting drafted is already the rarest step in the entire pipeline. This list is about what happens to the odds once you're already inside that rare group. We grouped the 20 rounds into 6 tiers and ranked them from the longest of long shots to the closest thing this draft has to a guarantee. Rounds 16 through 20, longest odds. Start at the very back of the draft, the final 5 rounds where teams are picking largely on organizational depth and upside dart throws rather than any real expectation of big league impact. Players selected this late reach the majors at a rate in the single digits, a number so low that most organizations treat these picks less like prospects and more like affordable roster filler for the minor leagues, keeping travel rosters full without meaningfully tying up bonus money. The signing bonuses at this stage are correspondingly small, and the leverage runs almost entirely in the team's favor. A player picked in these final rounds who wants a real shot often has to essentially create his own opportunity through outlier performance in the lowest levels of the minors, because the organizational investment simply isn't structured to protect him through inevitable early struggles, the way an early pick's bonus money guarantees. It's a tier of the draft where the sport is honest, structurally, about how much of a long shot every single one of these players actually is. Roughly 30% of all drafted players across every round combined never make it past single A ball at all, and that grim floor applies disproportionately to this tier, where a rough first professional summer is often all it takes for an organization to quietly move on rather than continue investing development resources. A player picked here isn't just fighting the odds of reaching the majors, he's fighting for the right to even get a genuine multi-year look in the first place, since the roster spot he occupies exists partly to be filled, not necessarily to be developed with the same patience reserved for a much larger bonus. Every draft class still produces at least a handful of genuine big leaguers who came from exactly this range, which is precisely why teams keep filling these rounds seriously rather than treating them as pure formality. The stories that do break through tend to share a common thread. A player who outperformed his draft slot so dramatically, so early in his professional career, that an organization had no choice but to reconsider its own initial evaluation and start treating him like a legitimate prospect rather than organizational filler. Scouting directors describe these final rounds using a specific kind of language that doesn't show up much earlier in the process. Words like makeup, work ethic, and coachability start carrying disproportionate weight relative to raw physical tools, because at this point in the draft, most of the players available have some kind of flaw significant enough to explain why they're still on the board this late. The bet increasingly isn't on talent alone. It's on which of these flawed but interesting players is actually going to put in the specific kind of unglamorous daily work required to outrun the odds attached to his own draft slot. Rounds 11 through 15. One tier up, and the odds improve, though not dramatically. Players drafted in this range reach the majors at a rate hovering in the low double digits, roughly 1 in 10, still a genuine long shot, but meaningfully better than the tier below it. This is where college performers who fell short of firmer promises further up the board often land. A player good enough to warrant real interest from a scouting department, just not good enough, or not seen as valuable enough on tools alone, to justify a bigger bonus commitment. It's also the tier where the draft and follow dynamic used to matter most before recent rule changes reshaped it. Teams historically had extra leverage to track a player's development for another year before fully committing bonus money, letting an organization hedge its bet on a mid-round pick without fully walking away from him. Even with the modern signing deadlines tightened up, These rounds remain the place where a team is betting on projection and physical tools more than a finished, big league ready skill set. This is also where high school players who slid due to a strong college commitment become a genuine strategic wildcard for teams. A talented prep player who's told scouts he's fully committed to a major college program often falls exactly into this range, even with tools that would otherwise warrant an earlier selection, because most teams assume they'll never actually get the chance to sign him. The rare team willing to overpay a mid-round bonus to buy him out of that college commitment occasionally finds a player whose actual talent level belongs several tiers higher on this entire list. The scouting philosophy at this depth of the draft shifts from who is the best player available to something closer to who has one carrying tool worth betting on. A player who runs a genuinely elite sprint time or shows a spin rate on a single pitch that no coaching staff could teach from scratch can get selected here purely on that one trait, with the explicit understanding that everything else about his game still needs years of professional development to catch up. Round 6 through 10. The odds jump again here to somewhere around 1 in 5, a meaningful enough chance that teams start treating these picks as genuine organizational assets rather than pure organizational filler. This is often where a college performer whose tools are solid but not spectacular gets rewarded for 4 years of consistent production, or where a high school talent who fell due to signability concerns lands after other teams passed for financial reasons rather than pure ability. The signing bonuses here start to reflect real financial commitment, even if they're a fraction of what a first-round talent commands, and teams begin assigning these picks to full-season minor league rosters rather than short-season, complex ball almost immediately. It's the first tier on this list where making the majors eventually starts to feel like a plausible outcome for a specific player rather than a statistical abstraction spread across hundreds of names. The player profile shifts here too. This range is disproportionately populated by college players in their draft-eligible junior or senior seasons. Players who've already proven they can perform against advanced amateur competition for multiple years running, even if their physical ceiling isn't quite as dramatic as a younger, higher upside high schooler taken several rounds earlier. Scouts describe this tier as where safe and upside genuinely start trading off against each other as competing philosophies, rather than one clearly winning out. It's also the range where a player's college conference starts mattering almost as much as his raw statistics. A hitter who dominated a smaller conference schedule gets discounted relative to one who performed similarly against a major conference's pitching depth, since scouts have decades of data suggesting the level of competition faced in college translates meaningfully into how quickly and how well a player adjusts to professional pitching once he signs. The signability calculation shifts noticeably in this range compared to the tiers below it. A player picked here has real, credible leverage if he's unhappy with his slot's bonus offer. A strong college commitment or a decision to return to school for another draft-eligible season is a genuine threat a team has to weigh, unlike a player in the final rounds who usually has far less practical alternative to simply signing whatever's offered. Negotiations in these middle rounds can occasionally stretch right up against the signing deadline, in a way earlier and later rounds rarely do. Rounds 3 through 5. Now, we're in genuinely serious territory. Players picked in this range reach the majors at a rate somewhere in the 30s percentage-wise. Not a coin flip yet, but closing in on one. This is the range where teams are still picking players they genuinely believe can be everyday contributors, just without the bidding war bonus money that the very top of the draft commands, often because of a specific carrying tool that needs more projection time to fully develop. The gap between this tier and the one below it is one of the sharpest cliffs anywhere on this list. A player picked in round 5 has roughly double the shot of a player picked in round 8, despite being separated by only 3 rounds and a matter of hours on draft day. It's the range of the draft where a team's scouting department earns its actual paycheck, correctly identifying the players whose tools will translate at higher levels before the industry consensus fully catches up. This tier also tends to produce the most statistically interesting split between position players and pitchers. College hitters selected in this range make it to the majors, get at least one hit, at a noticeably higher rate than pitchers taken in the same rounds get a strikeout, a gap that widens even further when you look past a single game appearance toward a genuinely sustained big league role. Pitching depth simply dries up faster than positional depth once you move past the first couple of rounds, which is part of why teams are frequently willing to reach for arms here that a purely statistical model might rank several rounds lower. The injury variable also starts carrying real statistical weight at this depth of the draft, particularly for pitchers. A talented arm who fell to round 3 or 4 due to a documented medical red flag, rather than pure lack of ability, represents one of the more common value plays in this entire tier. Teams betting that modern medical management can keep a player healthy long enough to justify a bonus that reflects genuine, first-round talent squeezed into a discounted price. There's a specific kind of scouting confidence required to spend a third-round pick on a player everyone else in the industry has already flagged, as risky for the exact same reason. Teams that build a reputation for successfully developing these medical flag reclamation projects tend to keep returning to the same well year after year, essentially building an entire organizational specialty around finding the value hiding inside risk that more conservative front offices simply won't touch this early in the draft. The second round. One step from the very top, and the odds cross the coin flip threshold decisively. Players selected in the second round reach the majors roughly half the time, a genuinely different proposition from every tier below it. These are players who, in a slightly different draft class or a slightly different set of team needs, could easily have gone in the first round instead. The gap in talent between the back of round 1 and the front of round 2 is often more about signability, team need, and bonus pool math than any meaningful difference in ability. The bonus money reflects that near-miss status too, still substantial, still enough to represent life-changing money for a 19 or 21-year-old, but a clear step down from the top of the board. It's the round that produces the most what-if stories in retrospect, a franchise cornerstone who slipped exactly one round, further than his talent probably justified, purely because of bonus demands or a crowded position group elsewhere in that year's class. Roughly 2/3 of drafted and signed second-round pitchers eventually record at least one major league strikeout, and a similar share of second-round hitters get at least one big league hit. Numbers that sound almost identical to the round directly above it until you look at how many of those players go on to have genuinely substantial careers rather than a brief cup of coffee. The gap between round 1 and round 2 isn't really about whether a player reaches the majors at all anymore. It's increasingly about whether he sticks there. Bonus pool math plays a bigger structural role in this round than most fans realize. Teams are allotted a fixed total pool of bonus money to spend across their entire draft, not an unlimited amount per pick, which means an overslot bonus paid to save a falling talent in the second round often comes directly out of money that would otherwise have gone to a player picked several rounds later. A team's second round strategy is rarely made in isolation. It's frequently the direct financial consequence of a decision made earlier that same day in round 1. The first round, best odds. And finally, the round where the draft stops being a lottery and starts resembling something closer to a genuine guarantee. Players selected in the first round reach the majors at a rate north of 2/3, and in some individual draft classes, the number has climbed into the low 90s, years where all but 1 or 2 signed first-round picks eventually played in the big leagues. It's the only round on this list where failing to make the majors is treated by the industry as the true exception rather than the expected outcome. Part of what drives that number is the sport's own incentive structure working in the player's favor for once. A team that hands a player a 7-figure signing bonus in the first round has every organizational reason to keep giving him chances to prove it was worth it, working through early struggles in the minors far longer than it would for a player who signed for a fraction of the money several rounds later. The talent gap between a first-round pick and a fifth-round pick is real, but it's not remotely as large as the gap in patience, investment, and manufactured opportunity that follows both players through their first several professional seasons. Even within the first round itself, the gradient is steep. Top 5 picks historically reach the majors at a rate comfortably above the round's overall average, while players taken in the back third of the first round still clear the bar far more often than not, but with noticeably more bust cases mixed in. Being the true consensus best player in a draft class carries a different level of organizational certainty than being the 28th best prospect a team decided was worth a smaller bonus commitment. Both wear the same first-round pick label on their baseball card, but the odds sitting underneath that label are meaningfully different depending on exactly where in the round the name got called. The position a player fills matters here too, in a way that rarely gets discussed. Among position players selected in the first round, the odds of eventually playing at least one big league game skew noticeably by position. A drafted first baseman reaches the majors more often than a drafted middle infielder or outfielder, largely because the offensive bar a first baseman needs to clear to justify a roster spot is lower than the far more demanding two-way skill set required up the middle. Even at the very top of the draft, not every position is competing on the same odds. High school pitchers taken in the first round represent this list's single riskiest bet. Statistically, despite the premium bonuses they routinely command, arm injuries strike younger, less physically mature pitchers at a higher rate than their college counterparts, and a first-round high school arm is effectively asking an organization to fund years of physical development on top of the usual professional learning curve. All before the biggest question of all, whether the elbow and shoulder simply hold up, has even been answered. 6 tiers, and the gap between the top and the bottom of this list is almost the entire story of how this sport allocates opportunity in the first place. Not just talent, but money, patience, and the willingness of an organization to keep believing in a player through the inevitable rough stretches every single prospect eventually hits. A single round separating 2 players on draft day can be the difference between a franchise fighting to develop him for half a decade and a franchise quietly letting him go after 2 disappointing seasons in A-ball. None of this means the earlier rounds always get it right, or that the back of the draft never produces a real big leaguer. Plenty of late round picks have gone on to outplay players taken hundreds of selections ahead of them. But as a pure question of odds, stacked purely on where a name gets called across one long June afternoon, the draft has never pretended to be fair. It's designed to concentrate opportunity exactly where the money already is. What makes this system so durable, decade after decade, is that it's largely self-reinforcing. A first-round bonus buys a player years of patient development that a later round bonus simply can't justify financially, which means the odds baked into this list aren't really measuring pure talent at all. They're measuring how much runway a player gets to turn talent into a finished big league product. 2 players with genuinely similar tools, drafted 3 rounds apart, can end up on opposite sides of a major league roster spot purely because one of them was given 5 years to work through his flaws and the other was given 2. Every June, all 6 of these tiers sit inside the exact same draft, on the exact same day, separated by nothing more than which name a general manager reads into a microphone at a given moment. The player picked 7th overall and the player picked in round 18 are, for that one afternoon, part of the identical class. And by the time either of them sees a big league field, if he ever does, the 6 tiers on this list will have already quietly decided which version of that story was always the more likely one. Thanks for making it through all 6 tiers. If your favorite team's draft picks finally make a little more sense, drop a like and subscribe. It genuinely helps the channel keep making these.